So Maggie Tillman here, thrilled to have you.
Oh,
who are you?
Bob Tillman. I'm her dad, by the way.
This is my dad.
Yeah.
And our wonderful colleague, Ivy Reynolds.
Hi guys, I'm Ivy. Nice to meet you.
So Ivy is our membership manager, and you are going to be hearing from her quite a bit over the coming few weeks. So stay tuned later this week for the official release email. But because you're participating with us tonight, you get first dibs on being able to taste the wines, customize everything, all that good stuff. So again, we're going to request that you stay muted. We're a year and a half in. Sadly, we all have Zoom memorized. So it's very sad. Congratulations to us all. Again, Melissa is jumping on to field any of your questions in the chat. So do not be shy. Throw stuff in there. Mel is on top of it. A lot of you know her. And if you don't, I hope you get to soon. Again, your first pour, you're welcome to pour a little splash, but we'll get to the Claudia Cuvee in kind of 5 minutes. So make sure you still have some left by the time we start talking about it. I want to remind you guys, this is being recorded. So we had a handful of members who weren't able to join us right on time. So over the next day or two, folks are going to be watching. So we are recording this. So thank you again. And I also like to point out 2 ounces, excuse me, those little bottles are 4 ounces. So for 2 people, if you just go half and half, that's a 2-ounce pour. That is heavier than you think. I promise. It's more wine than you think it is. In the tasting room, our average pour is about 1.25 ounces. So, you know, feel free to do a shorter pour. And it's actually pretty fun to come back later in the event to retaste things as we go. Things open up. Once you've tasted red and you go back to whites, or maybe you've enjoyed some of the cheeses, stuff changes around. So we recommend leaving a little bit to work with later on. And finally, if anyone would like a demo of how to log into your account and make customizations and add-ons, we're going to do that at the end. So we're going to be talking wine from now and for the next 55 minutes. And at that point, we'll say thank you and goodbye. But anyone who wants to stay on, please. And we'll do a screen shared demo of how we want you to do everything. Exactly. So with that, Dad, what's going on?
Well, let's talk about harvest a little bit. We are almost done. This year represents our 15th harvest.
That is nuts.
There's nothing average about it, actually. There's no other year that was anything similar. Basically, what happened was the vines kind of lollygagged through the summer, right up until veraison, which is when they start to color up. It's telling you getting close to picking. They were behind and kind of lagging. And then once they hit veraison, they just accelerated. And we ended up picking, right now we are over 90% in. That means we've picked it and crushed it and fermented it, which is extraordinary. It's sooner than any other year we've had. We have 107 tons that have come off of our vineyard. And a typical year for us is about 110. Mm-hmm. Projecting, we have 1 block left of Mourvedre, and we're thinking if it behaves like what we've seen thus far, we're going to come in around 120. So slightly better than average yields. It averages out about 3.8 tons to the acre or something like that. That's pretty typical for us yield-wise. Mm-hmm. Maybe a little above average. Our Syrahs come in around a little below 3, like 2.9 or so, and then the Grenache tends to be a little rich. There may be 4.5 or so. So that pulls that up into the upper 3 range.
Yeah. And Dad, can you speak a little bit, as you guys, I know many of you love Paso wines and you're not a member of Only One Wine Club and different things from different folks. So can you speak a little bit to yields, how things are looking in general?
Yeah, it's all over the map. There's kind of broadly 2 camps from what we can gather talking to everybody. One camp is similar to what we've experienced, which is a relatively early harvest and good yields. And the second camp is a relatively late harvest and poor yields. And it can be like, we know of somebody who's, as a crow flies, less than a mile from us, that has their yields coming in around 40% below. And they're just beginning to start picking. It's just crazy. There's no real rhyme or reason. You can't really attribute it to microclimate or anything that I can see. So funny year.
It is. Mm-hmm. It is. And we really considered stealing some of our cellar team. So winemaker Molly Lonborg, Andrew Tucker, our cellar master, and Deegan, I know her family is here. Hello. She's doing amazing work. But we didn't have the heart because it's just been a madhouse.
They've been hammered to death.
Yeah.
We basically about the last week of August, we picked every day for literally 3 weeks in a row, except Sunday. And picking is a killer thing. It starts at 3 o'clock in the morning and it really doesn't finish until 6 or 8 in the evening. And if you do that day after day after day, everybody wears down. So these guys, they have done yeoman work this year. It's been pretty amazing. Quality levels look great. I think the attention we've given to the wines has been good. So I'm pretty optimistic about it all.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Yes, stay tuned. The 2021s are going to be stellar. And every year, as you guys know, our focus is the vineyard. And so every year we're trying to up our game in terms of how we farm, get better at farming, and then just translate that more seamlessly every vintage on the winery side. And so we have an incredibly strong team, really in every corner of the business. And so we are excited to not only share these wines, but everything coming up. So let's drink some wine.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's a good idea. Yeah.
So we want everyone to start with our 2019, I hold this up as if you can read the label. This is our 2019 Claudia Cuvee. This is the Estate Marsanne. And just some real basic info. Our whites, incredibly limited this year. You will see bottle limits. It's not something we like to do to members, but we really want to make sure that all of you can enjoy it. So this does have a limit, you'll see, but you should stock up on everything you can because it's glorious. And with Claudia Cuvee, it's our original white wine. So Dad, why don't you tell us a little bit about how this came to be?
Well, some of you guys may have heard this story. Claudia is my mother. And as she aged, she developed a habit that would sort of revolved around kind of the time of the day. As the day wore on, it used to be 5, it moved up more like 4. If I were visiting, it would go something like this. She'd say, "Bobby, it's time to kick back." And what that meant was go to the refrigerator and pour me a glass of wine. And in the beginning of that was like some sort of sweet Moscato or some such thing. But early on, I realized I needed to change that particular behavior. So our very first white wine was dubbed Claudia Cuvee. And that was in 2008, actually.
Yes.
And it was indeed a Cuvee then. It was a blend of Marsanne, Roussanne, Viognier. Over the years, it's evolved now to where, like this year, it's 100% Marsanne. And that has been the case for a while, not necessarily 100%, but vastly majority of Marsanne for a long, long time. It's a great wine, yeah.
It is. This is a perfect kickback wine. The Rhone whites, we're all Rhones, as you all know, and Rhone whites really lend themselves to being versatile in terms of when and how you can enjoy them. So both of the whites we're going to talk about today, they have a weight and richness that make them wonderful as food whites, but they're also going to be beautiful to just sip. The aromatics are interesting, and they are nothing like Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, which is what you see on every wine list back when we could all go to restaurants. Pinot Grigio, excuse me, I did forget. And so this is a wine that we have for years. I can't remember the last time we released this wine not in the fall. We released this going into the winter, which isn't typical. So often we've been trained that white wine is for hot weather, white wine is for summer, which of course it is, but also like, why limit ourselves, you know? And both Claudia Cuvee and Model Citizen Roussanne are perfect going into the winter. And Ivy and I are going to sort of bounce back a little bit talking about these wines because it's not fun to have one of us blather at you for an hour. And because we all have our favorites when it comes to these things. So what's your approach, Ivy?
Well, I think just understanding that these wines really complement fall and winter foods so well. We talk a lot when we're blending these wines. We taste barrel by barrel. It's for reds and whites, but especially when it comes to our white wine, we don't make very many barrels of each wine. So when it comes to our Marsanne, we might have 10 barrels to taste from, and maybe less, depending on the year. So we really concentrate. And, we sit up there in the office right above where we are right now, and this round table kind of format, and we bounce these ideas back and forth. And the kind of the common themes that come up with Marsanne and Roussanne are almost always really fall forward notes. And usually when we're blending these, it's January and February, and it is cold. I mean, really cold, and like we're just need something warm to talk about. And so it ends up being that, you know, they kind of make me think of that anyway. And then you add in just the richness and the complexity and the way that we barrel ferment them. And for years, Bob, I would say you've, you know, spent significant effort defining the white wine barrels that we use for these wines. And now I would say we use a new barrel every now and then, but most of the time it's either neutral or used oak. So you're getting that beautiful leesy component, you know, that kind of textural element from the barrel aging and the stirring of the barrels. And they go just so well with the fall and winter foods. And then the other piece I wanted to highlight is our coworker, Emily, was a cheesemonger in New York City
She has like certifications.
Yeah, she's like a
Cheese lady.
She's a
I
cheese
can't
lady.
remember the name. Don't tell her I said
She's
that.
like the sommelier of cheese, but none of us know what it's called.
I'm very impressed by her. Anyways, she put together these cheese pairings. So I wanted to make a little quick note of that too. I know some of you sent us pictures of that you'd found the cheeses, and I just think it's really beautiful that we can have a white wine that is you know, barrel aged, that complements these foods so beautifully. So I wanted to make note of that.
And Mark, a great question about what our favorite pairings are with this. Again, Melissa is in the chat and she's gonna be able to jump in. So feel free to direct things at her or at us, and she's got us covered there. But one of the like first off the top of our head moments when we enjoy this wine is Thanksgiving. This has been on the Tillman family table since 2000, whenever we made it. And again, it really speaks to that versatility in terms of what Marsanne and Roussanne to some degree can do. Because if you think of a meal like Thanksgiving, I think of it and I feel full just by association, but it isn't really the protein. Like, yes, I eat turkey, but like turkey's not my favorite part. It's the potatoes and the stuffing and things that aren't necessarily protein driven, but sort of hefty foods. So having something on the table that can not only stand up to rich, cozy dishes, but isn't another heavy element on the table is wonderful. And it's one of my favorite things about this wine. Ivy, when you were talking about barrels, I think one of the people that deserves a nod in talking about this, and one of you mentioned this, is Jeff Cohn.
Yeah, totally.
Dad has it's a pretty good story about sort of how we initially shaped this wine.
I don't know if you guys know Jeff Cohn, but he's a really outstanding winemaker. He's in Sonoma. We have a biannual get together here in Paso that's oriented toward Rhone wines, and he was there pouring a Marsanne. This was, I don't know, 10 years ago. And it was one of these under the table kind of pours. You know, if you walk up, he says, "Here, let me show you this." He poured me that,
kind of pours.
and it just blew my mind. And on the very spot, I hadn't even met the guy before. I tell you what, I'll give you a ton of Marsanne off of my vineyard if you'll teach me how to make this wine. And he took me up on it, and he followed through, and I followed through, and he provided a lot of insight to me on it. And frankly, I think a lot of the kind of thought process of developing the wine is due to his influence.
Yeah.
But all that aside, I mean, just look at it. I mean,
yeah, it's beautiful.
This wine is in the glass it's just totally beautiful. And the stick your nose in there, and it's for me, it's like I'm outdoors on a fresh spring day. It's just brilliant. And get some scallops, saute them in butter.
Yeah, and the palate, even
Yeah.
though that's the aromatic profile, the palate is so, you know, has such texture. It's pretty amazing. I wanted to point out too, we hadn't really talked about it yet, but the part of the vineyard that both the Claudia Cuvee and some of our other white wines as well, our Grenache Blanc and our Viognier, come from you'll see on the map there, it's the top part of the map, which is actually the south part of the vineyard on a second hillside back. It's, you know, the ridge line is right there, blocks 11 and block 10. If you sat on the summit vineyard tasting deck, you're looking at that second ridge line back. And on that part of the vineyard, as you kind of crest over the hill, it's surprising how steep it is, you know, when you're up. I have a memory of being on the quad and going down and not thinking it was going to be that steep, and then you're going down and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is pretty steep. And again, yeah, it's pretty horrifying. Again, south facing, you know, so we get a good amount of sunlight. And it's a really special part of the vineyard. And then when this fruit comes off, I remember you telling me about probably my first harvest that the uglier the fruit was, probably the better it was going to taste. It's almost
really
brown, honeyed in
Yeah.
color. Brown isn't the right term. Honey is more marketing friendly, wouldn't you say? But it's it almost honeyed, this really beautiful color.
Really ugly.
It's that beautiful brown
Beautiful,
fruit.
yeah. We had to say at least one faux pas.
We promise it's really beautiful.
It is really beautiful. But as it settles out and we rack it in a barrel, we stir those barrels and we taste it every day. And it's amazing how early on those rich kind of aromatics come through. Yes. And I think it's going to be really neat for you guys to taste the Claudia Cuvee and the Model Citizen right next to each other. They're one of my favorite kind of compare and contrast models. So I think as we kind of transition away from Claudia and into Model Citizen, if you have two glasses and you can pour them next to each other, or if you can finish one and then pour the Model Citizen, it's a really neat wine. I think a lot of people think they're really similar, but this is just it's so neat to be able to taste them one after another.
Shall we to the
I think we
Roussanne?
should. A little
I'm looking at
Roussanne.
all of your faces. What do glasses look like? Full, empty? How are we doing?
Yes.
I'm seeing.
All right.
Okay.
I
I
see
see
a lot of
some
wine
wine.
out there.
Okay.
A lot of wine out
Okay.
there. All
In
right.
that case, we'll enjoy a little bit of Claudia for a minute,
Mhm.
and then we're gonna get ready to get into that 2019 Model Citizen.
The other thing about Marsanne is if you share it with your friends and neighbors, they will never have heard of it. You will have a
It's
unique
true.
wine. We have 1.25 acres of Marsanne, and the last time I looked, which has been a while, that was 1% of the entire
Mhm.
planting of North America. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, like
not a lot.
114 acres or something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah, it's not a ton at all.
yeah.
Oh, I love it. It's one of my favorite things to be able to introduce people to new varieties, especially white wine varieties, because you just see the same stuff everywhere. Not necessarily the same producers, but the Chardonnay, Sauv Blanc, Pinot Gris thing. And so just, expanding our horizons to having more options while we're out and about eating and drinking things.
Speaking of options, how about some Roussanne?
I
Roussanne,
think it's
let's
time
do
for
it.
some Roussanne.
Okay, I'm handing this to you, Ivy. You're going to
Okay.
start.
Uh-oh.
2019 Model Citizen Roussanne. Dad, I want you to explain why this wine is called that.
Well, so Roussanne is a possibly as rare as Marsanne, actually, a little known grape. When we planted it without knowing a lot about it, knowing we liked it from having tasted in other people. And I would say for the first 8 or 9 vintages, I always blended it away. I would just, the wine was solid, it had wonderful texture, but it didn't have a tremendous amount of aromatics associated with it. And I kept thinking, well, I don't know about this Roussanne.
Let's blend it.
Just blend it. But the thing was, in the vineyard, it is our most beautiful, outstanding block. It's just incredible.
And would you say in general, does Roussanne have a reputation for being well behaved in the
No, yeah,
vineyard?
it has a terrible reputation. In fact, here in Paso for years, there would be meetings every sort of Christmas time after harvest of people that grew Roussanne to get together to cry in their beer.
Yeah, you're like, we can confirm that didn't go great.
About how terrible it was. But meanwhile, our Roussanne was the most beautiful, most uniform, healthiest, vigorous, fantastic block on the whole damn vineyard. So we call it the Model Citizen.
Mhm.
And we called it that for years and years, never really utilizing the grapes. And eventually what happened was we made what we called a downslope white. So we made a wine that we took some wine, some barrels that we thought were really good barrels, but didn't quite fit our program. And we created a downslope blend. It was about 85% Roussanne, and we put it through our distributor here in Paso. And it was fine. It went great. We made maybe 80 cases. And literally 4 years later, we got a call that says, hey, we still have a couple of cases of this downslope that we can't
It
sell.
was like lost in a warehouse.
Yeah, lost in a warehouse. So
who knows?
we took it back and credited them for it. And then we opened one. It was like, holy Toledo.
And by we, Bob means he.
Yeah.
Like, what have I done?
And this was probably, what do you think, 15?
10 years later. Yeah. So
When was that?
I think
2015
15
maybe.
That
probably.
might be right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what this is, the
14 or 15,
19.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it was, what the secret to Roussanne is that it hunkers down and doesn't share itself for quite a while, actually, a year or two. And it was never long enough in our blending regime for us to figure that out. Now that we figured it out, we make a Model Citizen every year. Yeah.
And is it Cuvee or Au Bon Climat? There's someone in Santa Barbara County who makes Roussanne, and am I making this up?
They
Was
both
it only
probably
me?
do.
Yeah,
I think they both do. Yeah.
Maybe it was me, but I was somewhere and I tasted, a 25-year-old Central Coast Roussanne. Crazy.
Yeah.
Super beautiful.
Yeah.
And we are not suggesting that you wait 25 years to drink this wine, but if, something rolls into the back of the fridge,
You're gonna
it'll be
fine.
delicious for a while.
That's why we release it in the fall also. We try to
Yeah.
give it the extra bottle age, and another year wouldn't hurt anything.
Exactly.
We just did a really neat tasting a few months ago before harvest, and we tasted all of the Marsanne we'd ever made and all of the Roussanne we'd ever made. And we were shocked. Well, I was shocked. I don't know, you probably weren't. But our favorite vintages were actually a few years back. They aged beautifully. And I think the 15 Roussanne was tasting incredible, which was so counterintuitive to kind of my thought process. But it was beautiful. I think it's kind of neat to note too, the part of the vineyard that this Roussanne comes from is on, it's kind of the other side where the toasted slope is. This is on the other side. And if, the rest of the vineyard is pretty steep, this hill is very steep. Like don't want to walk down or back up kind of steep. It's really, really steep. And if you've seen our red barn, this is kind of to the, what would that be? The left of the red barn. Really, really interesting block. And like Bob said, it kind of just, tends to do what it's supposed to do year after year.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And the notes on this, a lot of folks, when they try these wines, they'll say, well, Marsanne and Roussanne, they're related. Do they taste the same? And I would argue, no, they really don't taste the same. I get a lot more richness on the aromatic profile of this. Our tasting notes say brown butter and sage, and I can totally see that. And then I think as far as the texture goes, the richness of this just fills your mouth.
Yeah.
You get that beautiful viscosity and richness. And
and I saw one of you commented that these would be great white wines for red wine drinkers. 100%. It's something that you hear when it comes to Rhones, and everything you're tasting from us ever is a Rhone variety. And often you hear people referring to the Rhone whites as whites for red drinkers. And I think that body is why. It's, you don't sip it and then it's gone. It has a finish. It has some weight. It has some oomph. It has some presence in a way.
And it
that,
ages also.
And it ages,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I can still taste it in my mouth, and it's been 2 minutes.
So we chatted a little bit about the Alta Colina origin of Marsanne, as well as the Roussanne. In terms of the barrel approach, what's the move, similarities, differences in terms of barrels on these wines?
Yeah, so for years we had, probably under the influence of Jeff Cohn, actually, our approach was we would make however many barrels we would make, and some years to be as few as 4. A big year for us might have been 6. And
Huge.
they're
Huge
pretty
year.
small. One of them, we would always put a new barrel in there. And oftentimes we'd do a power barrel. We'd get something that was like a barrel that really could kick ass in a red wine, and we'd stick it in there. And so when the wines were first released, they were a bit oaky. Not maybe even to the point of somebody said it's too much, but within at least 3, 4, 5 months, that would mellow out and you'd get this sort of thing that you're seeing here. As time has gone by, we've kind of backed away from that now. We've stopped putting in, not necessarily a new barrel every year, but we'll have barrels that are once used. So they've already given up a fair amount of their flavor, but they still have, I don't know, 40% left or something like that. And we're going with that. So we're toning that oak down just a hair. And I believe that the wine's improving a little bit. I like that style.
Crazy, beautiful. Ivy, when did we bottle this?
We bottled it in
February?
First week of February.
Yeah, so it's been in bottle for gosh, almost 7 months now.
Yeah.
It'll be 7 and almost 8 by the time you guys get these wines.
Yeah.
And I think that's really just become common practice. It does really well with some time in barrel.
That's, well, we should mention they spent a year in barrel. So this is a 19, right? Yeah. So it's a 19. We picked it in September of 2019, fermented it, put it in a barrel, left it through all of 2020, bottled it in February of 21, and then now here 8 months later. Yeah, 8 months later.
What day is it?
We're going to ship it to you guys. So it's been around a while, and it prospers from that.
And Melissa just clued me in. Someone had asked a question. Why doesn't this taste like an oaked Chardonnay? Which,
you know, great question.
My grandfather loves oak Chardonnay, so I have some experience.
By the way, Ivy's grandfather, whom we love, will text Ivy once or twice a year and just say, "Send me a case of the Chardonnay."
This is not the oak Chardonnay.
And we say, "Happy to oblige."
So I'm a little sensitive about the oak Chardonnay comment, but let me tell you the differences because I've spent some time studying it. I would say, you know, the main difference would be the fermentation process that we're using for this. So we're sending it through primary fermentation in barrel. So the juice gets pressed off in the press. It goes straight to barrel. From there, it's, you know, we do the work of turning the sugar into alcohol through yeast. That's done in barrel in our cold room. For those of you guys that have walked through the cellar, you know, during harvest, we have all of our white wines lined up, you know, against the wall. And that's when we're in there stirring every day, getting, you know, taking bricks and temp and all of that. At that point, usually we wait and we watch and we, you know, are very cautious when it comes to measuring those fermentations, and we wait until all of the sugar's fermented out. So it's a dry white wine at this point. And then at that point, we arrest fermentation. So we can do that a couple of different ways, but the goal would be to stop any bacteria from doing what's called malolactic fermentation. And malolactic fermentation is a technical term, but basically it can produce some of those buttery aromatics and flavors that you would notice in an oak Chardonnay. And so that's why this wine doesn't taste overly buttery or oaky. And I think the main reason for that is we've stopped that secondary fermentation called malolactic fermentation. So what that translates to when you taste it in your mouth is you get that beautiful acid that comes through, almost like green apple. It hasn't been converted into a milky or fatty acid. You get that really strong, beautiful acid with the barrel aged notes. So that's kind of the main difference between those two fermentation styles and the two styles of wine.
Beautifully said.
Indeed.
Beautifully
Maybe
said.
a little geeky, but you know.
It's on brand.
Okay.
I mean, on brand. So, all right, glasses check. How are we doing? We're ready. Okay, so let's
red
get in.
wine
Let's get in on the
time.
reds. So the next wine you're gonna pour is our 2018 Sun Worshipper. And I would like you to observe, we took one for the team, and the one where the label got ripped off, we will be enjoying. But I promise this is the 2018 Sun Worshipper. So we're gonna let you guys pour some in glasses. Keep throwing questions in the chat. Mel is on it. Love to see it. Also, Steve Bob Lindquist is totally the person. Thank you. that is, yes. Pulled that out of my brain. All right. So one of the things, especially coming off of Model Citizen, which I'm just going to finish.
Yep. Go, Maggie.
I think a lot with our wines about how being a state influences what ends up in the bottle. You know, if all of you said, we're going to band together, and those of us on this Zoom call are going to start a winery, you could call us, we could sell you grapes, you could make wine, and you can sell it, but you cannot say estate on the bottle because you didn't grow the grapes. So the fact that we're a state is a big deal, and it's relatively unique, and it's really core to what we're about. And it's been really cool over the years to get to know the vineyard. And this long lead-in is because both Model Citizen and our Sun Worshipper are really good examples of how the vineyard has surprised us in really positive ways. Where we planted Roussanne with the intention of blending it. We didn't really have a plan. We knew it would serve a purpose in the context of a blend. Turns out it's great. Mourvedre, exact same thing. When we planted Alta Colina Vineyard, making a beautiful GSM every year was part of the plan. And in order to do that, you need some M. And over the years of farming it, and working with it, a very similar story. We basically said, hold on, while this is beautiful in this blend, this also deserves to be showcased a little bit more.
Mhm.
And so this 2018 Sun Worshipper, it's about 60% Mourvedre. And as members, you're going to see these wines over many years. There is no formula. We are really working with what the vineyard gives in a certain vineyard.